Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So originally I was going to do a full crash course on newsletters all in one video, but I am splitting up into multiple. There's going to be at least 4, maybe even more about this topic, just because I realized when I went to edit the video, yes, I scripted and I filmed it, and I realized that I was taking on way too much. And I just felt like I was being a little too vague, not super helpful, and obviously my goal is to be helpful. So so this is going to be like a mini video series. This probably won't be that long, probably just like 4 or 5. And it's dedicated to my really good friend Aria because they asked if I could do a video about newsletters, and I was like, yes. So just in case you're not aware, because I don't think I've really mentioned on my channel before, I have talked about this on social media a little bit, but I did take a introduction to social media marketing class last semester, and that was an amazing class. I learned so much, and I learned a fuck ton about newsletters. And I've also done a lot of my own research about newsletters, so all of this is based on my own experience as someone who has been doing a newsletter for about 3 months now, and based on all of the research that I've done and just the stuff that I've learned. But before we get into the tips, let me just say that there are 2 types of planning you have to do when it comes to your newsletter. The first one is content planning. The second one is brand planning. So content planning is what it sounds like. It's the context of your newsletter, and we will get into that in this video. And the second is brand planning. And basically, your brand is what makes people go, oh, this is X. Oh, this is... You know, every author should have some sort of brand that makes people go, oh, it's them. I recognize this. So if you're planning a newsletter, you should already have an ongoing brand on other social media sites. And the sites that you are on are going to depend on a lot of factors that I'm not going to get into right now. If you want more videos about brand planning or about marketing in general, comment down below. I do know a fair amount about marketing, so I'd be more than willing to make some videos about that. But in short, you also need to keep in mind the brand of your newsletter, so I will also be going into that in this video, but just keep in mind that those are 2 separate things, but they also both need to be planned out for your newsletter, and it should be consistent throughout it. Just wanted to say that, and I wanted to explain what they are just in case you're not aware. So now, let's get into the video. So my first tip for you is to stalk other people's newsletters. I love newsletters. I subscribe to a fair amount of people, so I'm going to go ahead and link the people that I subscribe to and love, and I would highly recommend for you to just look at other people's newsletters and see what they're doing. And this isn't me saying that you should copy these people, but just see what they're doing and see what you like, and maybe even see what you don't like. For example, oh my god, I love when people shout out other people in the writing community, so I created the section in my newsletter, the People I Adore section. That way I could do, you know, that thing that I've seen other people do, but I also made it my own because, you know, I gave it like a different title. The idea of it is a little different than other people that I've seen do similar things like that. But on the flip side, one of the things that annoyed the shit out of me with newsletters is when the entire newsletter is basically just an ad for someone's book. When that is the case, I immediately unsubscribe. It annoys the shit out of me. And while I don't really have a book to promote right now, I know that in the future that's never happening because that annoys the fuck out of me. Because there's a difference between having one section of your newsletter dedicated to promoting your book and having the entire newsletter dedicated to promoting your book. So now that you have taken a look at other people's newsletters, it's time to think about your newsletter in particular, which brings us to number 2, which is what can you bring to the table? Keep in mind what you're already doing on other social media platforms, such as giving writing advice, doing book reviews, book hauls, stuff like that, and incorporate that into your newsletter. And that's kind of how you can think of what you can bring to the table, because chances are you're already bringing stuff to the table. Most, if not every writer, had something that they can bring to the community. And this doesn't have to be something that the community has never seen before. It could be something pretty common, like knowing how grammar works or knowing how certain writing rules work. And once you have figured out what you have to author, figure out a way to incorporate that into your newsletter. And that being said, that brings us to number 3, which is Brainstorm. Now that you have looked through other people's newsletters and you have come up with hopefully a few ideas for your own. It's time to make a full list of all of the ideas that you have. Now, just because you have an idea for your newsletter does not mean that you need to use it. In fact, when I brainstormed for my newsletter, I did have a few ideas that I ended up not using for various reasons, but honestly the main one was that I already had like 7 sections to my newsletter, so I didn't want to have to add another one. And over time you can swap out sections of your newsletter as you please, but just try and come up with a solid list and see if you can combine any of your ideas. I would recommend to have anywhere from like 3 to 5, maybe up to like 8 sections of your newsletter, depending on how long each of these sections are going to be and what your target audience is. For example, my target audience is adults, so I am okay with my newsletter being on the longer side because in comparison to teenagers, adults tend to have longer attention spans. Number 4, consider the branding. So now that you know what the content of your newsletter is going to be, you need to think about what it's going to look like. Like I said earlier, your branding from your other social media platforms should carry over into your newsletter. So if you have a set color scheme, you should have that in your newsletter. And if you don't, you should make one. Once you have your colors, think about with the colors what all is going to make sense. Let's say on Instagram you have pink and black as your colors. So is that pink going to be pastel? Is it going to be a neon pink? What is it going to be? And then when it comes to the title fonts, are you going to use a more formal business-like font like Times New Roman, or are you going to use more of a fun font like some sort of a scripty font? Are you going to use various types of media such as YouTube videos, links to Instagram posts or pictures? Or is it basically all just going to be text? And if you're sitting there like, fuck if I know, here are 2 things that you should probably do to figure that shit out. Number 1, play around with the software that you plan to use to send out your newsletter. For me personally, I use MailChimp. Number 2, go back to step 1 and look at other people's newsletters. It is still very helpful to see how people title things, what their color scheme is like, what the formatting looks like, stuff like that. And now that we have covered the content and the brand, we are getting into something very nitty-gritty that you probably think is boring and doesn't matter, but trust me, it does, and that's number 5, timing. You need to figure out how often you are sending out your newsletter. In my experience, the most common intervals of time to send them out are either once a month or once a quarter. Personally, I would recommend once a month just because you are going to be able to reach your audience a lot more that way, and I think you're able to gain more subscribers that way. But if you really don't want to dedicate yourself to sending out 1 newsletter a month, a newsletter a quarter is perfectly fine. Also need to think about the day and time that you are going to be sending your newsletter out. Now, the day and time, there's a lot of mixed data on it. I've heard a lot of different statistics about it, but in my opinion, I think the safe spot is midweek and midday. So for me personally, I send my newsletter out on the last Tuesday of the month at somewhere between noon and 3 p.m. Good days to send out your newsletter tend to be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but honestly, Mondays and Fridays are fine. Just don't send them out on Saturdays or Sundays. Going back to the timing, I've also heard that like morning can also potentially be a good time. So for example, from 9 a.m. to like 11 a.m. some people can also think is a good time, but again, there's a lot of mixed data. So I personally would just say to just try and focus on midday, midweek is usually a safe spot, but you do you. And make sure you figure all of this out before you send out your newsletter. That way, for 1, it's going to be a less of a headache for you, and number 2, it's going to be a more consistent thing for your audience so that people know what day and time of month or quarter they can expect to receive a newsletter from you. That being said, those are all of the tips and the things for you to consider. That being said, that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please give it a big thumbs up and hit that big red subscribe button down below and turn on post notifications so that you know every time that I upload. And if you want to see more marketing videos from me, please comment down below and let me know what type of marketing videos you'd be most interested in. And if you have any questions about newsletters, please comment below so that I can tailor the rest of the videos in this like little mini series that I'm doing to what you guys need help with. And yeah, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!